Wrestling Report. Yes, welcome to the BS Wrestling Report. This is Bryon. With me as always is Steve. We got Matt Beaver sitting in with us. And also we've got the man, Eric Bischoff. Eric, how are you doing this afternoon?
Doing really well, thank you.
Good. All right, so Steve, you want to kick it off with some questions there?
Absolutely. First thing I want to do is say, Eric, we had some scheduling, issues getting this done, but I'm just want to let you know how appreciative the three of us are that you took some time out of your busy schedule. I know you said you had to go to New York earlier in the week. Hopefully that was a successful trip for you. Just want to thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Excellent. So last time we talked, we didn't get to talk too much about it, but I really wanted to talk about, first and foremost, your Buffalo Bill Cody beer. And Garrett and I chat every now and then. He's a hell of a guy, and he always rubs it in my face when he's drinking your beer. And we touched on it briefly, but when do you see you getting some more distribution rights to push farther east, so folks not in the mountain range can give it a whirl and put a few bucks in your pocket by drinking the shit out of it?
Well, it's a long, slow process. It's beer. It's funny, like every industry that emerges and gets popular and successful. It's far more competitive now. The beer business, craft beer business, it's far more competitive now and challenging in many ways than it was even 3 years ago, 4 years ago when we started. Craft beer is taking up a larger and larger percentage of the total beer market. There's more and more craft breweries popping up every day, and it means that it's harder and harder to get shelf space. So the strategy that we have is to kind of slow grow based on success in the regional market. We just opened up Arizona. Recently, Colorado will be right around the first of the year, right after the first of the year. Sounds like we have opened up Nevada. So that should happen right after the first of the year as well. So, we're currently in, Wyoming, Montana, North, South Dakota, soon Colorado, Arizona, Nevada. That's a pretty healthy market for a small craft brewer like us. So we'll keep growing. Our next markets will likely be Florida, in a couple areas. Tennessee would be a good market for us. But the Buffalo Bill Cody brand, the kind of cowboy culture brand, is not the type of brand that is really going to probably do all that well in a place like Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, where there's not, big, large pockets of kind of, like I said, cowboy culture kind of people, consumers. So we'll grow slow, but we're having fun with it, and it's a blast.
I really, that's all I drink now is craft beers, and I'm really, really eager to try new beers. And like when you were sitting down with Austin, and he's, calls himself a world famous beer drinker, he raved about it, and I think he was genuine and not just trying to butter you up. And I'm really looking forward to trying it. Garrett told me it's excellent, and so now how can people listening in kind of keep tabs on Buffalo Bill Cody beer? Do you guys have a website, a Facebook, a Twitter for it?
Yeah, we've got BuffaloBillCodyBeer.com, and we do have a Twitter. The website is probably in process right now, getting updated. So probably another 30, 45 days, we'll have a really current, up-to-date website. But we'll keep plugging it, and people will be able to kind of stay on top of where we're going.
Like I said, I'm really excited for you to hit that Florida market. I will be one of the first ones out there to buy myself a 6, 12, 24, whatever you offer it in. And I really can't wait. Now, if we can switch gears for a little bit, I want to touch on your partnership with Jason. Many people don't know Eric is great friends with Jason Hervey. Some of you might know him from the Wonder Years. My first experience with Jason Hervey was seeing Paul Lee clock him in the head with a cell phone way back when on WCW. So how did you and Jason get partnered up that branched off into BHE TV, and if you could talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, obviously we met. Jason was kind of active in WCW at about the same time I came in. He might have been shortly thereafter. Can't remember the timing of that, but early '90s. Jason was active, and he was friends with a couple of people in WCW, and I met him through my relationship within WCW. And just over the years, shortly after we met, I should say, he and I just, I'm an entrepreneur, he's an entrepreneur, and we bounced ideas off of each other. And I can't remember what year it was. It might have been '93, probably late '92 or '93. We actually kind of developed a kids show together, and pitched the idea together, and ended up selling it to Fox. Fox used to have a children's network, and we sold the Fox Kids Network, and that was our first experience kind of pitching shows together, and we just stayed close and stayed friends and worked together more and more and more until one day we both woke up and said, hey, why don't, instead of working for other people, why don't we just form our own company? I think this was in 2003. Form our own company and build our own business. So we've been doing it ever since.
So now, do you guys like? I'm not very keen on how TV production goes. So do you guys have any upcoming projects that we should be seeing? Is it going to be regional, nationwide? Any pilots we can come check out?
Well, the one that is most recent actually was advertised in Sons of Anarchy this past last week. And
That's
I think
huge.
we've got an ad. We have an ad that you will see, a commercial that you'll see in Sons of Anarchy, the final episode this Tuesday night, for a new show called Outlaw Country, and that's on WGN. I can't remember the start date right off the top of my head. It's in February. That's a really, really exciting show. I've been looking at the clips, every day, and I know WGN is very excited about it. So that'll be the next one. And we've got probably 6 or 8 shows in development at any one time.
Now, Mr. Bischoff, staying with the business ventures and things of that nature, let's talk a little bit about the MX project that you have going on. The typical internet wrestling fan may not, delve into a lot of personal projects or things that people are doing these days. So go ahead and give our listeners a little bit about the background of MX Digital and what's going on with that and what we can see in the future with that.
Yeah, MX Digital is a company that Jason and I own a large part of, and essentially when we founded it, we created it, and it's essentially a company that takes brands, celebrities. For example, we have Hulk Hogan, we have David Hasselhoff, we have James Dean, Chuck Norris in Missing in Action, Joe Frazier, Dennis Rodman. We decided to deal with the Blues Brothers. And I should say for the Blues Brothers, not with the Blues Brothers, but we take those brands and we convert them into essentially what is a digital slot machine, a casino-style slot machine. And internationally, almost everywhere outside of the United States, it's a very legal, sophisticated, legitimate business, primarily throughout Europe, with the nucleus of the business being in in the UK. And we build those out, we promote them, we distribute them with key players in the industry around the world. And then we just, as a part of that, we've taken that digital engine, if you will, for that slot machine, and we've created a social casino, MX. It's on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/MX MX Casino, and you can play our games for free. There's no wagering, much like Farmville and Candy Crush and a lot of other games that people play and compete against each other with. But you can play essentially the same game on Facebook. And it's a big part of our business. So we're expanding our social casino on Facebook quite a bit. We've got a new brand that we're launching very soon on Facebook called El Paso, which I'm really excited about. It's based on a graphic novel called El Paso, and it's based on a true character. It was the original sheriff of El Paso, Texas. So it's a great storyline, amazing graphics, cool music. It's a great game.
Sounds interesting. I'll have to keep my eye out and peeled for that one. I always like to see that kind of stuff, what people are doing. Now, it seems like you find yourself spread, I don't want to say you spread yourself thin, but seems like you have so many different projects going on. Is it just off the top of my head, is that a task, keeping yourself organized and focusing on these topics and these projects? Do you have to, how do you manage your time with that kind of stuff like that? With all these
well, first of all, I'm not working all by myself. We've got a great team. I've got a great partner. We've got a great staff on both MX Casino and within BHE. So, I focus on certain aspects of our business. Jason will focus on certain aspects, and obviously we delegate.
Yeah.
It's like any other business.
Just having a good team behind you.
Well, and essentially, here's, aside from beer, that was the one kind of outside of the box project that we started, and it really started as a vanity project. To be honest with you, it started like my wife and I just said, "Oh, this will be fun to do," and before we knew it, here we are. But the rest of our businesses are all very much interrelated. It's all based on entertainment. It's all celebrity based, or most of it is, and television properties, and the distribution of those properties. Now, yes, television is different than the casino business, but it all comes back down to celebrities and knowing brands. So while they may seem like they're all kind of disconnected and we've got all kinds of balls in the air at the same time, really it's all part of the same core business, which is entertainment, brands, celebrity distribution.
There you go. Now, that was kind of the question that came as we were talking about all these different things. But the real question I had in hand was, as an entrepreneur, it seems I kind of like to put myself in that same thing. I've started many projects. Some have continued, some have failed, some have whatever. Now, I find myself always constantly thinking, and I've listened to other interviews with entrepreneurs, and they're saying, they have a new great idea every 20 seconds they turn around. What were some of the ideas that you had in your brain at some point in time that you thought were going to be the next thing, and maybe it just never came to fruition, or it wasn't the idea you thought it came to be? Was there anything, that was it was a burning desire at a moment, then you realized, well, maybe not so good of an idea, or just it didn't pan out the way it should have been?
Oh gosh, I don't. Oh God, I'm sure there's been many of them.
You find yourself in that same situation of having a new idea all the time and popping those.
No. I mean, not all the time. We stay pretty focused. I've learned to stay pretty focused. And there's a lot of ideas that pop into your head, or opportunities that pop up in your day or your life. And for a moment, they may seem like, wow, that'd be really exciting. But you kind of learn to filter those. Yeah. And, when you've built a business, and when you failed at building businesses, and when you've seen what goes into it in order for it to be really successful, you tend to learn, either through success or sometimes failure, just how difficult it is. And learning that kind of helps you create a filter so that you don't allow yourself to just jump into the next big idea, or what you think is a big idea, on a moment's notice. And it's discipline, it's experience, it's age, and it's a good thing. But I've always been the type of person that's I can get excited about many different things, and I've always had different balls in the air at the same time. It's one of the reasons I got in the wrestling business, or ended up in the wrestling business, was a result of that. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think you have to learn how to manage yourself.
Yeah, there you go.
And Eric, I'm kind of glad you brought up the wrestling business, because as you saw, we tweeted out on our Twitter at BSW Report. If anybody has any questions for you, and your Twitter handle is at @ebischoff, send us on in, and we could ask a few for you to answer. And one of them that stuck out to me, and this was a two-parter, and this gentleman's name, he is at ZM_Lopez, and he says, Mr. Bischoff, I have two questions for you. First of all, if you could choose one thing that was, your biggest regret looking back on your time at WCW, what was it? And then how close were you and your group to purchasing WCW back in 2001?
I've answered this question, and no offense to the person who sent it in, or for you guys asking it, but I wrote a book that covered all that, and I've probably done 100 interviews and answered that same question. but in we were very close to purchasing WCW. We were probably within weeks of finalizing a deal that had been negotiated, and we had spent 6 months or 8 months doing due diligence on, and spent a significant amount of money, probably close to $700,000 or $800,000, on doing due diligence on with attorneys and so forth. So we were extremely close, and it was very disappointing. I don't remember off the top of my head whether we were a week away or a month away, but we were not far from either one of those, probably somewhere in the middle. As far as my biggest regret goes, there was a moment in time when I thought the handwriting was on the wall at WCW during the AOL Time Warner merger, and that the outlook for the company, and this was probably in late 1998, the outlook for WCW from my perspective, seeing what was going on behind the scenes, was very grim. And there was a point where I was ready to resign, because I would have resigned at a point in time. I would have resigned on a high note, as opposed to writing it out, for another year or two, when, even though I knew what was happening, I had no ability to really change at least a portion of it that I wanted to. It's not that, none of it was my fault. Of course, I could have done things differently, and, maybe, things would have been different.
Yeah.
For a while, but at the end of the day, AOL Time Warner did not want wrestling on the network. Did not want it, regardless of how successful it was. Yeah. They did not want that property, and they were able to do the things that they needed to do to make sure that inevitably they wouldn't have wrestling on their network. And there was nothing that I realistically could have done to change that. And like I said, I saw that freight train coming in about 98. I stuck it out, and I probably regret more than anything sticking it out as long as I did.
Mm-hmm. I mean, once the suits, make the decision, you got to go with the people who write the paychecks. Another good Twitter question that came in from @McRyan77. In your opinion, who is the absolute best worker you had on your roster in WCW?
First of all, I never really refer to wrestlers as workers. That's a, kind of inside term that people outside of the business like to use to, sound like they know more about the industry than they really do. But, I look at to me, they're performers. And I can't say there was any single best, because it's like saying, who's the best actor you know? Well, that depends. What kind of film, what kind of actor are you talking about? Are you talking about an action, somebody that specializes in action or drama or comedy or, combination of all? There were so many great performers and so much great talent there. For me, it's just hard to say any one of them was best. It depends on what you like. It depends on what appeals to you. Wrestling, I've said this before, wrestling, people want to kind of look at wrestling from their perspective and think that it should all be what they like. If you like, kind of high-flying, fast-paced, kind of aerial type of wrestling, then you're going to like a certain style or a certain promotion. If you're someone like me who likes more character-driven and really more storyline-driven, episodic kind of, performers, then you're going to think somebody else is a great wrestler. So it really all depends on what you like.
Yeah.
I didn't finish my own sentence. To me, wrestling is like a buffet. People go because you go to a restaurant with a great buffet because it's got, great prime rib, it's got great seafood, it's got great chicken, it's got great vegetarian food. It's got a little bit for everybody. And that's the way wrestling is and the way it should be.
No, I mean that's probably the best way it's ever been that I've heard it worded in a while, is that you got to have a little bit of it for everybody. So everybody's little flavor. You got the high flyers, luchadors. You go down the hardcore, if you will, into that alley, or you can go up. Everybody's got their own thing of what they like in wrestling. So it's got to be, you got to touch on everything on a 2-hour show or 3-hour show, whatever it is. So it's hard to pick one thing.
Yep.
My question that I wanted to, you spoke a little bit about your book earlier. How was just the creative process of writing your book? Was that something you found to be an awesome project that you would take on again? Was it something that you did it, you got your book out and you're moving on, or was it How was it? I just think I'm just kind of fascinated by listening to people's creative process while writing books and how they handled that and how they did it all.
Well, it was fun. It was fun. It was a unique experience for me because by the time we started writing that book, and obviously I had an author that worked with me that really did a great job of organizing the book and making it easy for the reader to follow and keeping everything in chronological order and bringing up the details and the timing of those details in such a way that the book really flowed. And it really was fun for me. I'm not sure fun is the right word. Fascinating for me is because, quite frankly, I had forgotten so much, and because I don't live in the past, I literally barely can remember what I had for lunch and where I was yesterday. Because once I kind of tend to live for today and get excited about tomorrow. And by the time we started writing that book and we're detailing things that were happening in 1993 or 1994, when my co-author was, bringing these things up and helping me to organize my way through them, it's like, wow, I forgot all about that. Yeah, that really, holy smokes, that really did happen. That was pretty damn exciting. So that the entire process for me was really one. It's kind of like, here's how to describe it. Imagine you had a great, family, photo album that dated back, a long, long time, and you forgot where you put it. And years later, you found it, and you looked through it for the first time, and you remembered all those great moments, and some of them not so great. And seeing that for the first time was kind of like imagine the feeling you would get if that would happen to you. That was kind of like the process, every time we got on the phone and started working through the book. It was like, oh, wow, holy smoke. And then when I finally, sat down to read it, and it kind of really all came to life, in a transcript form and flowed so well, it was great. It was a look back on something that was obviously a big part of my life, still is, but it was like seeing it for the first time. It was kind of cool. As far as doing another one, I really don't think I've got a book in me. I don't think there's enough that has happened that's book worthy in my life that enough readers would be interested in reading about to justify the time and the effort that it takes to put out a book. So it was my first experience. It was a great experience, and unless I get voted in for president or something, it'll be my last experience.
Yeah, I just think that I've listened to many authors talk about writing books, and it just seems that the process is something of, like you were explaining, like they're just sitting there and remembering these moments and trying to fit them into the story and how to make it all come together, and working with the authors and the co-writers and everything like that. It just seems like a cool process, and if I was ever had more of an interesting life, I'd love to write a book, but I don't know if I've done anything yet. I don't think people.
Well, and today, like everything else, it's so many people self-publish now. Yeah. It used to be, and that was another reason why I was excited about writing a book. I was with WWE at the time. They had a deal with Simon & Schuster. WWE was a monster. They had some successful books. So sitting down and writing a book, no matter who you are, I shouldn't say no matter who you are, but sitting down and writing a book is one thing. Having a publisher and a platform to promote that book to millions of people every week, that's a whole different deal. And I could have written that same book without the WWE, theoretically, if I could have written that same book but done it without WWE, hundreds of people may have read it instead of making the New York Times bestseller list. It's having that platform made all of the difference in the world.
For sure. I mean, that's got to that's a huge part to getting that book out there and having it spoke about on national TV weekly for in front of millions of people all the time. That's huge. And it's the powerhouse they have behind them with everything that they do is just they've got so much to work with there.
And let me jump in here real quick. Speaking of the book, Mr. Bischoff, I wanted to ask you. Now, this question is not limited to just professional wrestling or the world of wrestling. What is the proudest moment in your entire life? Something that you can just sit back and in a moment's notice and just be like, I did that or I created that. What is your proudest moment to date?
Well, again, having two healthy, happy kids, having a great wife, beautiful wife, is probably the thing that I'm most proud of. And those weren't single moments; those are a combination of moments. In terms of, that's another question that sounds so easy, but it's really so hard to be honest about. In just wrestling, if I just isolate it to wrestling, what's the most proud wrestling moment I've ever had? It was probably Bash at the Beach. It was probably watching, the Hulk Hogan character transform. That was pretty amazing and pretty hard to beat. But, it's hard to measure, the rest of your life and try to isolate what was the single most proud moment. It's kind of hard to do.
Right, and that Bash at the Beach moment, I mean, you can't argue with that. I mean, that moment in its own is forever ingrained in the minds of wrestling fans all over the world for the end of their time. But you are correct with your answer with family first. I can get behind that. Now, to jump on that, what was the greatest adversity you ever faced in your life, or the biggest challenge that you had to overcome, in which you did?
Because you guys are asking questions like a shrink might ask.
I'm just trying to get in the mind, man.
Yeah, no, I don't know how to answer that one either. I've never, I'm a pretty fortunate guy, and that's not to say that I haven't had days where I want to go bang my head on a curb and I don't feel like I have an answer to a challenge or a problem, because that happens every day. To this day, it happens. But that's life, and I kind of figure out a way to get past them or move on. In some cases, sometimes you just can't fix things, or sometimes you just can't solve things, and you move on, and you find something else to tackle, and you kind of forget about it. So I kind of feel it's why I don't look back. It's why I don't look back at success, nor do I look back at failure. Because it was yesterday. I can't do anything about it. I can't base the rest of my life on something successful that I did 10 years ago or two days ago, and I can't base the rest of my life on failure that I had 10 years ago or 2 days ago. It's kind of like you learn, you get you develop your experience and your filter, like we were talking about earlier, your instinct, and you move on, and you hope that tomorrow's going to be a better day than today, or your next opportunity will be a better opportunity. But I can't say that I've really had a challenge that I felt impossible to overcome. Lots of frustrations. Like I said, I bang my head on many, many rocks, but just move on.
Yeah. So I have a question. I'm just going to kind of touch back into wrestling a little bit. I know we weren't keeping that as our main focus today. Just wanted to talk to Eric Bischoff, the man. But as the business of wrestling has basically come down to WWE, and there is TNA, but it's WWE's got about 98% of the pie of professional wrestling, and then across the board, there's still all these indie promotions. Now, how do you feel? Is it as the internet has been able to be this medium and this tool for these wrestlers to use? Do you see this as a positive thing or a negative thing in the eyes of wrestling and self-promotion and using these things to get out there? Because we were talking, as you mentioned earlier, about self-publishing, and there's so many out there. There's guys like Colt Cabana that really take over the internet and really take into the internet and really made themselves. He's got his podcast and his T-shirts and does the whole thing and books himself out constantly. And it just seems like, with that tool, is that a positive thing for the wrestling business, do you see, or is that something that you think is going to work against them in the long run?
Well, I think it's probably good for certain individuals who have found a way to capitalize on it. like Coquitlam. I think there are other people. You guys have your podcast. You're doing it for a reason, partly because you love it, hopefully because you're making money at it. But there are people out there that are making money wrestling in the wrestling business, or even peripherally, they're finding their necessary levels of success. And I think that's great for them. But if you look at the business as a whole, and by the way, this isn't the internet's fault. Okay, don't let any of your listeners misread me here. I think the wrestling business as a whole is suffering because of the lack of television diversification. Well, there's a lot of indie promoters out there. There's basically right now the WWE, and everybody else, doesn't measure up to much of a share of the overall audience that the WWE has in terms of total dollars in revenue. So I think that the lack of syndication, the way it existed, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago when wrestling, was based on regional territories, that's hurt the business because now guys don't learn. It's harder for wrestlers to really learn. They can go to a wrestling school and they can learn how to get through a match. Some of them become really great, and a lot of them never do because there's no diversification. There's no opportunity to learn the way that guys were able to learn up until about 10 years ago. And that's what's really hurt the business, in my opinion. You can't get great as a performer performing in front of 250 people and doing it the same way you do it every single night, because that's the only thing you know, and it's the only thing you're asked to do. You become a Ric Flair, or you become even a Hulk Hogan, who's not he'll admit and be happy to tell you he's never been a great physical performer, but he learned his craft because he was able to travel around the country in relatively big markets like Minneapolis and obviously in the WWF when he was starting out, and really learn how to engage a crowd, night in and night out. And I think that's the part of the business that suffers more than anything. It's just that, while that's happening, you also have, the internet and the proliferation of, the independent shows. But I just don't think those are great places for the majority of people who participate in them to really learn their craft. And I know a lot of the internet fans are going to, hate me for saying that and find 1,000 different ways to try to prove me wrong. But, if just look at the challenge that the WWE has in, creating a new star. It's because they're working with guys that are only learning one way. In the WWE way right now is the best way to learn. It's really a great way, but it's still a challenge.
Yeah, I mean that's it, and it seems like it seems like if you're not in the WWE, what you're in is kind of like that old punk rock. You're in that punk rock. You're in a punk rock band, but you make your money by selling T-shirts, and it seems like that's the way that a lot of this indie stuff is turned over for these guys. Watching from the outside, is that they're getting booked at indie shows, and I don't know what guys are getting booked for. I'm sure it ranges from $20 to a couple $1,000 maybe. But they're making these guys in the middle, are making their money off of selling their merchandise that they're getting printed and bringing out on the road with them. So it seems like
and listen, don't get me wrong, I've been to a couple of indie shows and that have been really great shows.
Yeah.
But they've been really great shows primarily because there was some guys that had experience either in WCW or WWE who were mixed in really well with a young, vibrant, up and coming group of guys. But when those guys are no longer really able or should be able to or should be performing in those shows, when all you really have are guys that have never been to the dance, so to speak, anywhere, just out performing in indie shows, I think that's when you're really going to see the bottom fall out, the quality of the indie show market. And like I said, there are some great ones out there. There really are.
I'm glad you brought up indie shows because the first time I met your son was at an indie show out here in Tampa, and you hit the nail on the head. You know, they had some guys out there with some experience, you know, Mason Ryan, Wes Briscoe, and your son, of course, and they had a lot of good up-and-comers, and there might have been 150, 200 people in there, but I can't tell you, you know, describe how much fun I had just from the atmosphere and being, you know, up close, you know, just watching the action and all the personalities. It was an absolute great time, and I wish more people would, you know, be able to check out indie shows to experience what some might call like the other side of pro wrestling, because it really is an eye-opening experience.
Yeah, and it's why, you know, I had to be careful, or trying to be careful how I answer that, because I don't mean to disparage them in any way, shape, or form. You know, we were talking about, you know, the future of the business and guys learning and that type of thing. But they are fun. You know, like I said, I've been to smaller ones that have been a blast. Hell, I've promoted some that were probably nothing more than really an indie show when I was in AWA and I first started promoting events. Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty were on the card, by the very first card I ever promoted in a small town in, you know, Iowa, Mason City, Iowa. There was probably no more than 300 people at. By any definition, that was an indie show. But, you know, they were great performers, and the people had a great time. So, you know it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but, you know, they can be a great experience. But in terms of the future of the business and guys really learning their craft and experiencing a diversity of styles and techniques and having matches with, you know, different people where you're forced to learn, I think that's the opportunity that the lack of regional territories and the lack of television opportunities has created, you know, or helped to create that vacuum.
I definitely agree. So this question just popped in my head. Pure shoot here. So if you had the opportunity right now to run, you know, WWE, you know, you are the man, no Vince, no nothing. It's Eric's company. What you know, one or two points would you make it a note to change? You know, to make it more you. What would you like to see change?
Well, that's a tough one, you know, for me to. Okay, now, what is Vince McMahon doing? He's a billionaire, and I'm not. He's got a you know, international television powerhouse, and I don't. So what would I do differently? I don't know. It's hard to think about. I guess if I could, as a fan, okay, not as someone who thinks they know how to do it better, but as a fan, knowing what I know a little bit about, I would pursue more diversity in my talent base. And by diversity, I mean, yes, you want younger guys. Yes, you need that, especially when your, you know, demographic and your television audience, you know, demands that you be. But I would strive to avoid a sameness. I wouldn't want my talent to all kind of walk and talk the same, to generalize.
Mm-hmm.
I would want there to be the kind of diversity in characters that helps me appeal to a broader audience. As we said earlier, you know, I would make the quality of the things on my buffet more distinct,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to kind of sort of all tasting like fish. And that, again, that sounds like a disparaging comment because it's
mm-hmm.
not the way I think about WWE, but I think that's one of the things that I would think about if I was in that position is how do I make my talent roster, my talent pool, and what I present feel a little more diverse, so that I don't get a sense of sameness that I sometimes feel as a viewer.
Yeah, I can agree with that 100%.
Yep, me too.
Now let's get away from the fantasy booking of if you were in WWE now. Let's talk about when you were in WWE. Out of the 1,200 episodes of Monday Night Raw, well documented, one of the best episodes in many people's opinion was your debut on Monday Night Raw. What was going through your mind personally as the night went along and we kept teasing the new GM, before you walked through that curtain, what was going through your mind? Did you know that it was going to make as big of an impact as it did?
I was, I didn't know. You never know for sure as a performer how an audience is going to react, or at least I never did. So I don't want to say I knew it was going to be big. I was pretty confident. I was calm. I was very calm. I was oddly calm because I'm not a calm person by nature. I'm usually pretty intense. But for some odd reason, I was very, very relaxed. I mean, from the minute I literally hung up the phone with Vince McMahon, which was only a couple of weeks before, having my initial conversation with him, probably after 5 minutes into the conversation, I kind of knew it was the right thing to do and the right way to do it. And I never had any anxiety about it in any way. It was probably one of the most calm experiences I've ever had as a performer, and I can't explain why. It was just pure fun for me. It was just pure fun.
Yeah, it's definitely something that, as fans, we thought we would never ever see on this side of the TV.
Yeah, and I have to say, it wasn't my highlight of what I did in WWE. It was certainly a big moment and one that I look back on when people bring it up. Oh, wow, that was really pretty damn cool. But it wasn't the biggest moment for me. It wasn't the most fun thing I did. But you asked the question, what was going through my mind, and I can't tell you specifically, but I can just tell you I remember just I was smiling, I was relaxed. I remember sitting back in a limousine because they did a great job of hiding me and keeping it a secret, and I was very happy about that. And I remember sitting in a limo because nobody had seen me. I pulled up to the limo, probably right around 5 o'clock or 5:30 before showtime, and I stayed in the limo because I didn't want anybody to see me because we didn't want it to leak. And I saw people walking back and forth, and, they couldn't see in the limo, but they were trying their best. And just watching the faces of people backstage, and, they were anticipating as much as anybody. And I remember at one time, and I can't remember if it was Stephanie that came in first, or Stephanie and Hunter, I can't remember exactly. I know Stephanie's there, I can't remember if Hunter was. I think it was just Stephanie. She got in the limo with me, and I had only talked to her on the phone. I had never met her in person previous to that. And she got in the car, she says, well, how are you feeling? I said, I feel great. And she kind of looked at me and she said, are you nervous? I said, not at all. and I wasn't trying to, if I was nervous, I would have told her I was nervous. But I just wasn't. And I could see by the look on her face that she was like, well, what do you mean you're not nervous? How could you not be nervous? Don't you care? She didn't say that. But I don't think she was expecting me to say it. I feel great, not nervous at all. Because I didn't understand that feeling that way, to be honest with you. And, she was very nice. And, okay, it's going to be big. Good luck. I show all whatever she said. Said all the right things. And she got out. And then Vince got in the car a little bit afterwards. The same thing. Hey, Belle, how you feeling? Feel great, Vince. It's going to be a blast. Huh. Yeah. All right. Let's have a good show. Something to that effect. But I could see the same thing. It was kind of like, how the hell could you not be nervous? And like I said, I don't want to be redundant. I just wasn't. I was looking forward to it.
Yeah. I think as you were going through that story, and they wanted to keep you in the limousine, and they didn't want nobody to see you for a surprise. That's what I think is missing from wrestling now is surprise.
Well, it's an element. And you very astute to bring it up. That's probably another thing that's become very difficult to manage in the digital age. Is you can't. It's impossible, almost impossible now, on any regular basis at least. To create. If you can't create surprise, it's very hard to create anticipation.
Correct.
So when you lose one, you lose the other. And when when you've lost surprise and you've really mitigated or handcuffed your ability to create anticipation, then you start to lose the ability to really make great story, because surprise and anticipation are key elements to great story.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a domino effect, and that is one of the things that's made the business as a whole much more difficult today than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean that's a fact, and that's kind of what's not necessarily taking me out of it, but which doesn't get me like going. It's Monday, 9 o'clock. Where's wrestling? You know what I'm saying? What's gonna happen? As I years ago would sit there and wait and wonder what was gonna happen from the end of last show to this show, but that's been removed due to digital, internet, blah 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 down the line.
Well, digital and internet, but it's also because of television itself. It's just the nature of producing television is so much different now than it was. SmackDown, is fake. Monday Night Raw is still live, and if there's ever an element of surprise available to the audience, it's right there.
Yeah.
But that's it. And even that's pretty hard nowadays. It's pretty hard to keep a secret.
Yeah. My one last question before we wrap things up here is, would there be any recommendation of a book that you would have for any upcoming entrepreneurs that you think that somebody should just have read, creating a brand, anything like that? Is there anything that you could recommend?
There's so many of them out there, and I don't want to suggest that I'm an avid reader of business books, because I'm not. But there is a book that I read years ago, and I don't remember the author's name, but the book is entitled The Entertainment Economy. And for me personally, and not for entrepreneurs across the board, but for many of them, because I think so many aspects of our lives really are based in the world of entertainment. In one way, shape, or form, people are vying for your attention, whether it's to sell tacos, or wrestling, or ballpoint pens. They're trying to entertain you with a message, or they're trying to entertain you with a half-hour show, or they're entertaining you with the news or information. The internet is living proof that the entertainment economy, is written about in that book, probably 15 years ago now, has come to pass, because now people are spending all of their time on the internet. That's where they get their entertainment. So I would say The Entertainment Economy, for me, was one of the best books I've read, and I think it's still very true to this day.
Well,
still a great book.
I love reading those kind of books, so I needed to get one right from Eric Bischoff on what he would recommend, so that way I have something to read. So I'll get that on my list. Well, as we've been chatting for an hour, man. Time flies, but I'd like to say thank you for coming on and chatting with us. I had a blast just listening to you talk, and it's amazing. You got a lot of amazing stories and point of view, and the things you've done in and out of wrestling business and all that stuff. It all intrigues me, and I love listening to you talk, man. So thank you again for coming on and hanging out with us. It was awesome.
All right, guys. Thank you very much, and we'll speak again soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Bye-bye. All